Hello and welcome to the Bright Talk DevOps Agile ITSM channel. My name is David Smith. I'm the president of Micromation. I'm going to be your presenter for today's session on how DevOps helps run IT like a business. If you have any questions during this session, please type them into your chat box and I'll refer to them at the end of the session, time permitting. The session will also be recorded and will be made available for your reference. So, let's get started. Well, what I'd like to share with you is some information that I think is very vital to today's timing of what's happening in the whole industry around IT. There's a new digital business model that's being used by leading organizations. And people and organizations are tapping into this model, and the reason is that it is helping them really get quickly to market new products and the concept of from concept to cash, as well as helping them lower their operating expenditures and costs. And in some cases, it's even helping to avoid or being replaced by startups or new applications. So this whole area that is taking off, we've seen lots of evidence of other fast-moving organizations that are literally displacing traditional companies. And, organizations such as Netflix and Spotify and Facebook and Uber and Apple Pay, Airbnb, these are all very familiar names and they're in the news all the time. And they've really locked on to a technique, and one thing that they have in common is that they're using a new business practice and being able to transform IT very quickly and getting business functionality to market. And they're using a method called DevOps and principles from that area, referred to as DevOps. So this DevOps is making dramatic changes to traditional methods. And if you can just imagine being able to, in 200 times faster develop software and deploy them, and increase the deployment frequency by 30 times and have, 60 times higher change success rate. Now, some of these numbers seem far-fetched and almost unbelievable, but there's lots of data now that supports this, and this stuff is now being measured on a constant basis. And I'm going to actually show you some of these measurements. And basically what they're doing is they take some of the traditional methods that we're very familiar with, like ITIL and the lifecycle model, and well as the software development lifecycle, and they put them on steroids and are able to make these dramatic leaps and gains. There's specific reference now to different models, and some that are referred to as the Spotify model. And Spotify is a company that has successfully been able to transform and use DevOps principles. And out of their playbook, this is an example of some of the new criteria that they use to sort of manage the deployment of new functionality to the market. So some of the rules that they're working by now is, number one, business alignment versus autonomy. So they're trying to get a balance between, what is the right way to manage the business, yet give their people autonomy to work in teams. And these teams are focused on highly motivated staff. They're given the objectives to go forth and to create new capabilities. And they're giving a lot of areas where they're able to instruct them to, make mistakes. Make mistakes, find out what works, what doesn't work, and do it very quickly. And you do this through experimentation. So they have this experiment-friendly culture. And they also work with principles like minimum lovable products. So, small product sets, looking for what is the most minimal viable feature set that would be attractive to customers, and they engage customers to help formulate what that is. They also work on the principle of the minimum viable bureaucracy, or what's the least amount of rules that you can have to actually run the business, and as well highly engaged staff. So the staff are totally involved in and responsible for the end-to-end delivery. And they've made the releasing of new software very easy. And also they've made the employees the innovators and given them the instructions, don't waste time on nonsense. So if anything looks to you to be like nonsense, get that out of the way and don't work on that. So these are now techniques that companies are deploying and taking advantage of. You've probably also heard Uberification. Uber is another company that has exploited these new capabilities. You too can take advantage of these new models. You don't have to be a big hot internet company of gigantic size to be a leader in this area. Small companies, old, young, new, everybody can take advantage of these techniques. You just have to learn what they are. So what I hope to do is to take you through, and in today's agenda, give you some background on what is DevOps all about. Why are these leading organizations adopting DevOps? And specifically, who are the key roles and what are the disciplines involved in DevOps? I'll talk about some of the key ingredients that it takes to get DevOps up and running, as well as some of the key principles. There's 6 specifically I'll take you through. And then I'll tell you a little bit about a new organization that's starting up called DevOps Agile Skills Association, or DASA for short. DASA has also introduced a competency framework and certification that's around that. And I'll also share with you steps on how to get started. So let's jump into it and go through some of this information. Now, for me to better construct my delivery here, it's a good idea for me to see who's on the call here and get a little bit of your experience with DevOps. So I'm going to run a voting exercise here, and I'd like to find out, are you an expert? Have you been practicing DevOps for many years? I'm going to start the voting now. Do you know a little bit about DevOps, but you want to know more, or maybe you have no experience with DevOps at all? So I'll give you a couple of seconds here to make your votes, and if you could start voting. I've got votes coming in. Give it a few more seconds here. I'm very interested to find out what your experience is with DevOps here. Okay, I'm going to stop the voting now, and we will view the results and see what it said. Okay, so we do have some experts here on the lines. We've got some people that have been practicing at that, but the majority want to know more about DevOps and or have no experience at all. Okay, great. Good. All right, so we will get into this now that I've got a sense of who's on the call. So let's start. What's DevOps all about? Well, the best way for me to describe this is to give you a little bit of history on, how did DevOps get its name? Where did it come from? And it all started with a fellow named Patrick Dubois back in 2007. And Patrick noticed that he was working with the Belgian government on a data set migration and became very frustrated with what he called the wall of confusion between the developers and the systems administrators and operations. And, he was just dumbfounded with how they could not get things to, quickly happen. So he attended a conference actually in Toronto, just close to where I live, and it was a Agile conference, and there was a posting on the wall by a fellow named Andrew Schaefer, and it was in a session called Birds of a Feather, and it was all about Agile infrastructure. And guess what? No one showed up except one person. That was Patrick. This resonated with Patrick, the whole notion of Agile infrastructure and, getting things up and running quickly. So the two of them, sat and discussed and shared their thoughts and ideas in this session. And then shortly after that, they departed, and Patrick, he was attending another session called Velocity 09. And this one was, there were some speakers, John Allspaw and Paul Hammond, who were given their famous talk about the 10 deploys per day, dev and ops cooperating at Flickr. And so, this is one that was attended by Patrick, and it really resonated with him. And he got in touch with some of the folks there through Twitter, and they started a dialogue, and they convinced Patrick, this is real, we've solved some of these issues, and you should get some of your own people and run your own sessions, run your own velocity sessions. So Patrick debated on this, and then he finally decided in 2009, yes, he would run his own session, and he then had to come up with a name, and so he came up with the two words dev, the first three letters of development and operations, and called it DevOps Days. DevOps Days, and this is still running to this day. And that was kind of like the founding start of this whole movement. And what they talked about in DevOps Days was the typical challenges that many organizations, the pain that they were sharing, and it can be summarized as they were getting pretty low quality from the delivery of software products, and they were delivering products that customers at the end didn't really like them, and that they took too long to get, and they were very infrequent in terms of the frequency and that they were getting released. There were many errors. It was time-consuming. They were, error-prone. They were highly manual. And as a result of this, it was because of manual releases and large product backlogs that the releases were very infrequent. So this, again, you started to share these thoughts with other people, and what it boiled down to is that there's some real differences in terms of thinking between the development group and operations. And development is tasked with getting new features and functionality out to the customers as quickly as possible, whereas operations is more about keeping the site stable and fast. So the difference being that for developers, change is good, but for operations people, stability is good. And so they're a bit at odds, and they get into bun fighting where the developers would say, well, it's not my code, it's your machines, and the operations to say, well, it's not my machines, it's your code, and the dialogue and capitulating back and forth. So when they looked at where were the root of these problems coming from, what they found is that they're organizationally different silos, which had completely different mindsets in terms of what their goals and objectives were. And as a result of that, they often had different ways of implementing things. So the developers would implement using their tool set, and the operations people have a different set of tools. They didn't really have an interest in learning each other's tools. They worked on different environments. Often the QA and the test and the prod or production environments weren't necessarily the same environment. So this caused, in a lot of cases, excessive rework because there would be bugs, things wouldn't work, they'd have to roll things back. There was a lot of blaming, going back and forth. Rollbacks caused downtime sometimes with end users, and they had processes that were not integrated together and no feedback loops. So root causes, these are a lot of the issues that the DevOps days were identifying as the root cause. So what is DevOps? Well, it's really about practitioners getting together and sharing what they learned with each other. So it's practitioners by practitioners. It's not a product or a specification or even a job title. It's really experiences being shared by people in a totally decentralized format. And this is how the whole thing got started. The name DevOps, a little clunky, but it stuck. And so that's where this is coming from. And now there's tremendous success being learned from these people, and there's an entire movement that's happening here that you need to get involved in and be a part of. So let's talk a little bit about why are people getting involved with this, and here's 10 very good reasons. One is that by identifying this and working together in these teams, people started to share ideas and they started to collaborate. And by collaborating and increasing that area, they were able to just solve some simple problems and start to improve the ability to get things to market quicker. And they did this by breaking down these silos and looking at ways to make things more efficient and eliminating the things, the nonsense things, which we call waste in Lean. As a result of this, people started to spend more time being more creative and being more innovative. So they reinvested that wasted time into being more creative. As a result of that, the cost of resources and overall costs, which most of this is time, labor-intensive areas, it started to reduce, and increased engagement and job satisfaction. People were much more happier, and they were able to continuously start to integrate and deliver this and automate things much more quickly. And as a result of that, fewer failures were happening, and overall performance started to increase, and the environment started to become more stable. So this is a cause and effect chain that people or organizations are experiencing as a result of trying to break the challenges of traditional methods that we have been using. So my question to you is, where does your company stand, 5 years from now? There's a lot of fast-paced companies out there that are disrupting the way things happen, and to survive, you need to radically rethink what your IT strategy is and make yourself somewhat anti-fragile and become much more able to get things to market more quickly in order to fend off or compete with these new radical companies that are out there. And if you look at some of the market shifts that have happened, Netflix totally took over, the movie rental business, and Uber is, totally disrupting the taxi business, and we're all very familiar with those stories that are happening right here in front of us. So, who are the key roles, and what are some of the disciplines that are involved in this new DevOps movement? Well, the roles are basically you need to put together autonomous teams. And the autonomous teams are comprised essentially of you have a leader or manager that can organize the team. There would be architects, developers, testers, release operations, someone that could represent the user and the user experience, operations engineering, and business representation as well. So these are teams that have a full complement of different aspects of the entire cycle of the business that are involved. And they work as a group or in an autonomous fashion in order to get things done. Now, there's an interesting thing that happens when you put a team together and you make them autonomous and you point them in a direction and you kind of give them a goal. And some write-ups that were done about this were by Daniel Pink, who wrote a series of books, but one in particular recent was called Drive. And Daniel talked about, what motivates people. And what he netted out was that there's three factors. One is that the team has to have a sense of purpose. What is the goal? What am I trying to achieve? And how do whatever I do, how does it contribute to the big picture? And the second point was that the team needs to be autonomous, meaning that it can't be micromanaged. It has to be pointed in a direction and given the ability to be empowered to work as a unit to take and make this happen. And then the team itself, what motivates people is the ability to master things or to become an expert at something. So through trial and error, and you learn from your errors and feedback loops, that they start to perfect things and they work at better forming a cohesive unit that is much more effective in getting things done. So Daniel, eloquently describes how these mechanisms work in formulating these autonomous teams. Now, there's another interesting thing that happens as well is the teams bring different disciplines to the table, and what makes them effective is that they need a little bit of things like the ITIL or IT Infrastructure Library or the ITSM background. All of those processes and that naming conventions and the methods and all of that is great input to the team. But also you need to use things like lean thinking and making sure that you find ways to reduce waste and focus on what the customer wants and make things flow very quickly. You also can take advantage of Agile. Agile is a movement whereby they avoid or got away from the waterfall type software development and looked at more agile small packaging and delivery of small code sets or feature functions very quickly to the customer. And then taking advantage of cloud-based technology platforms and infrastructure services, which are now available, that are very quick to automate and stand up new capability. So it's kind of like these different disciplines coming together and using them and automating them in with these teams to be able to make DevOps work very efficient and effective. Now, some of the key ingredients to make this work are, one, there is new ability to take IT infrastructure and treat it like code and make it very lightweight and to put it in containers and to be able to move these containers around. And so if you can think of developing an infrastructure using code, like on your desktop, and then moving it wherever you want. You can move it to another server, you can move it to the cloud, you can move it from one cloud to another cloud. And the ability to move these infrastructures around very quickly and in a lightweight fashion has enabled the ability to get things launched out into different areas and scale up and down very quickly. How is that done? Well, there's all kinds of very mature public cloud solutions out there that people are able to take advantage of. Amazon, Google, Microsoft are very capable now and are now able to use their native cloud capabilities that help you deploy very scalable and flexible cloud-based technology to platform and run all of these technologies. Now, part and parcel of that with Agile software development, which was, at one point just a bunch of guys around a Scrum board, Post-it notes, creating features. Well, this has gone mainstream now, and being able to deploy, things as simple as infrastructure as code and all of that in the real world, it's real now, and it's not just hype. Organizations are really taking advantage of this. And getting away from monolithic and, large application architectures and focusing on, small deployments, features, has allowed them to more quickly get, functionality to the end user more quickly and to the customers, and having the customers involved in describing what it is that they want and flowing those features to them and getting instant feedback from them. So this is a change in how they deploy. They deploy features versus large applications. And then finally, organizations are realizing that by streamlining the way that they deploy the technology out into the operational or production areas through new principles of highly automating the delivery and operational practices, and they're using lean thinking to find ways to reduce the waste and automate those deployments. So it's kind of like these areas are helping these organizations, dramatically get new functionality quickly to market. So what are the 6 DevOps principles? Well, here's what the DASA organization, who I'm going to talk about in a second, has come up with. One is you need to have customer-centric capability or focus. So you want to focus on what it is the customer wants. And this is coming from lean thinking as well. You start with creating the end in mind. So you work backwards. So what is it that the customer wants? And you start to work backwards to figure out what it is and how that you're going to put that in place. You also instill a core principle whereby there's end-to-end responsibility for the teams that are actually deploying. So from inception right through to delivery, developing the code, testing, deploying, and as well supporting, the team that's involved is responsible for the end-to-end capability and delivering what the customer has in mind with that focus. And how they do that through number 4 principle is using these cross-functional autonomous teams. So that's where you do have the team leader and the architects and the developers and testers and operations teams all formulate as part of that team. And then built into this is the notion of continuous improvement. So using techniques where they experiment and look for failures quickly and to learn from those experiences and to improve from that, doing things in small experimental batches. This is how they're able to get feedback loops and measure things and verify that things are working. And finally, automating everything that you can. So to dive a little deeper into this, so principle number 1, DevOps encourages an open culture that has the characteristics where there's minimal bureaucracy, there's no fear of asking questions and or of taking risks and being innovative and making that possible for the people that are working there. Number 2 is creating with the end in mind. So you need to focus on what it is that the customer wants and then be able to collaborate with the team on how you're going to actually deliver, as opposed to being micromanaged, which is the traditional way of doing it. Principle number 3 is end-to-end responsibility. So making sure that the people that are involved in this, that they have the notion that this is going to be on them to deliver the final result, to see whether the customer is happy with what they've produced, as opposed to often it's a case where in the old days with silos, organizations or people would have the notion that they do their part, but everything else was not their job. Well, in this case, everybody has a stake in delivering the end result. So that is that end-to-end responsibility. Principle number 4 is using the cross-functional autonomous teams and having representation and disciplines from all different areas being part of the team and helping people work as a collaborative unit. There's no such thing as a DevOps hero. In the old days of having the heroes that were going to solve particular problems goes out the window, because now it's all about team-based approaches and working as a group. Finally, working in continuous improvement, and this is where identifying opportunities to reduce waste through experimentation, finding out where things fail, and encouraging people to test things and try and make them fail so that they can make them more resilient and stable in the end. And then focusing on how to automate everything that you can. So in a lot of cases with this new technologies that are out there, there's lots and lots of new tools that help codify everything. So codification of the infrastructure, the platforms, the procedures and the methods, to deploy, to test, to do automated testing and automated measurements and monitoring and all of those things, everything that can be automated and measured, they help drive efficiency and consistency of delivery. So those techniques our principles are also very important. So what is DevOps Agile skills, DASA, all about? I sort of gave you a clue. I mentioned a little bit about it a few seconds ago. To help make this much more powerful and get it into the hands of more people, DASA, which is an open global community, has formulated, and it stands for DevOps and Agile Skills Development. It's a totally open organization that has membership from around the world, and it's practitioners supporting practitioners, and they're all converging and contributing in an open format ideas and competencies and learnings and building upon this. So this organization is building a knowledge base that's going to help broaden the skills and knowledge that people need to get up to speed on DevOps. So their broader purpose and aim is to promote knowledge and skills and using a framework based on a set of defined principles, which I covered the 6 principles, was from DASA. They're also generating interest in creating awareness of these. They formulated these leader groups that are now evangelizing and spreading the word about how to get up to speed on what DASA is. I'm part of that group. I'm helping them do that through presentations like this one that you're on right now. And they're also providing training and content-based, role-based competence training to be able to get people up to speed. And then they're approaching this from a vendor-neutral qualification program, so you don't have to be an expert in any particular vendor platform. It's totally open, and they're providing a qualification scheme so that people can be certified and on the knowledge and skills that they require to go through this. Now, what does this DASA competence framework look like? Well, it looks kind of like this. There is a number of skills and knowledge areas which have been identified. And in the knowledge areas, there are 8 specific key areas that have been identified, things like architecture and design, business value optimization, business analysis, test specifications, programming, continuous delivery, security, risk, and competence, as well as infrastructure engineering. So those are skill or knowledge areas that everybody needs to be very proficient at. In addition to that, there are skills areas that there's 4 of them specific relevant to DevOps, and that's the courage to go ahead and take on things and test things, team building, leadership, and continuous improvement. So those skills areas have also been factored into that. Now, there's also a bit of a maturity model that's tied to this in a career path or a certification path, if you want to call it that, that's also available. And so this is the DASA competency framework, which recognizes 5 maturity levels. So you can see that there's level 1 through 5, and starting at level 2, there's a competent level, which there's a course called DevOps Fundamentals. It's 3 days, and then you can go to the next level, which is at a proficient level. This is where we've got practitioner level DevOps training. It's a 2-day course. And then you can go to expert level, which then breaks into specialty areas. So first specialty area is enable and scale. Second one is specify and verify. And the third one is create and deliver. So these are specialty areas that somewhat cover, you can think of it as the life cycle of deploying concept through to delivery. And so these training courses are now becoming available through many training organizations throughout the world and in North America. For example, here is the DevOps Fundamentals training, the 3-day training class that I referred to, the first starting point. It's open to individuals in development and or operations or service management, or even individuals that are touched by any of these areas. The 3-day course starts with an introduction. It has an introduction also to DevOps, and then it gets into specifically the culture, organizational issues, processes, and automation, measurements, and improvement. And then there is a mock exam, and then optionally there is an exam that you can write, and if you pass it with a 65% in an exam that's closed book with 40 multiple choice questions, and you get a certification. And this is done remotely through web proctoring. Okay, so when should you get DevOps started? Well, let's do another poll at this point, and I'd like to ask, first of all, where are you in DevOps? I know some of you have been involved, so let's start this poll to get a sense of where are you in your decision-making about DevOps. Have you already implemented DevOps? B, do you plan to implement DevOps in the next 1 to 3 months? Or you're considering it, trying it out, but maybe it's 3 to 6 months out, or no plans yet, still thinking about it or still doing research. So let's get your feedback here. I've got some votes coming in. Give me a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to stop the voting now, and let's view the results. So let's see. 25% of you already have implemented DevOps. B, 13% are planning DevOps in the next 1 to 3 months. And 19% are considering it in the next 3 to 6 months. And 44%, no plans yet, still researching. Okay, so that's an inverted bell. That's interesting. Okay. Well, let me tell you, I'm going to close this now. Here's what I think you need to consider. I think you need to get on this right away. First of all, there are a lot of companies out there that are, in some cases, just startup companies or even an app, and they are putting a lot of pressure on traditional companies. And that's forcing firms and organizations to, insulate yourself or become anti-fragile so that you don't get displaced or end up in a circumstance whereby you end up in the last stage, DevOps are dying. And this is a good message. And, one quote that's from Jack Welch is, if the rate of change on the outside exceeds the rate of change on the inside, the end is near. So we know by just looking at what's happening in IT that the pace of change is always increasing and getting faster. So I think you kind of need to pick up the pace and get involved here. And I think from an ROI point of view, this is why you need to pay attention here. Here is a simple model that I put together, and I based it on some research that was done by Puppet. Puppet's an organization that also has DevOps tools to help organizations deploy. Now, Puppet has been doing surveys for the last number of years, some very good survey information, and they're available to you. And I'll provide a link to you that you can get access to that. But what the surveys looked at is that how many people are adopting this and what kind of benefits are they getting out of DevOps. And there's just some amazing numbers that are coming back. And to explain the numbers, first I need to give you a picture here of what's sort of happening. So this picture here is a very high-level diagram that just shows you, there's a requirement, it leads to design, which somebody leads to develop it, then it leads to testing, and then deploying, and then maintenance, and then, you're ready to do another requirement. So this is a very simple model of a software development lifecycle. Now, you'll notice that there's some measures on here, and you'll see that from requirement to deployment, there's a top measure called lead time, and how long does it take you to deploy a new requirement? And then you'll also see, beside that, there's one called downtime. And if you deploy and you have to roll back because the deployment or there was a bug or a problem or a failed change, there sometimes results in downtime. So that's another measurement. Now you'll notice down underneath each of the items, there's requirement, design, develop, test, and deploy. There's these feedback loops called rework. Now rework is when you pass things to the next layer, but something wasn't quite working right, and it's sent back, and so you have to rework it. This could happen anywhere along the path, and it could be between stages. It could be, you deployed, the whole thing failed, it had to go right back to the drawing board. Rework is big, it's real, and it wastes a lot of time. And when you have organizations traditionally that don't work well together because of the wall of confusion, there is a lot of rework that can happen. And then the last measure that I show you is deployment frequency, and that's how quickly are you able to deploy new changes to the organization. If you don't do this very fast, what happens is that you build up what they refer to as technical debt. Technical debt is where you end up with large backlogs that you can never clear because you just don't have the resources or the time to be able to do it. Now, with this model and these metrics sort of laid out for you, I hope it's clear that when I show you the next couple of slides, there is a huge value proposition here to get this right. From a savings point of view, Puppet has gone and surveyed organizations that have done this, and they found that there's just significant numbers. If you can reduce your excess rework, as an example, this is one area. Rework is that unplanned work because of things that didn't work, and you had to go back and redo them. So what Puppet did is they created some financial models, and based on their surveys of very large organizations right to small organizations, and a large organization could be 40,000 engineers, small ones could be 250 or less. Then they also categorize these organizations into what they refer to as high performers, medium performers, and low performers. High performers were the ones that are actively practicing DevOps capability, and they're good at it, and they've been doing it for a while, and they know what they're doing. And then the ones that are low performers are ones that don't practice any of the new DevOps principles that I was referring to. Obviously, medium performers are ones that are sort of partway there, but still working on it. So what they did was they got all these numbers, they surveyed all these organizations, and we're talking thousands of individuals contributed to this, and they've been doing it multi-year. This is from the 2016 report. And they asked the question, what would happen if you were to reduce excess rework by 10%? How much could that save? And that's what these numbers here represent, is just by reducing or improving excess rework by 10%. This is the kind of magnitude of savings that you can see for these different organizations, and depending on what your maturity level is with DevOps. So if I take, as an example, a large organization, high performer can still, even by improving 10%, $693 million US. Low performance, large organizations, we're talking billions. That's how much wasted effort just in this one particular area. Small organizations, same thing. It's millions of dollars. So people, now that they're realizing that there's huge opportunity to save their labor, and again, this is labor converted to show you in a dollar sense what it looks like. To illustrate it, that's what this chart shows. I'm going to show another one. This one was the impact of downtime per year. So if an organization was able to reduce its downtime, what might that look like? And so same principle. They took the high performers, the medium performers, and the low performers, and they looked at, what is your deployment frequency? And as a result of that, how often do you have failures? And how long does it take you to recover from those failures? And this is mean time to recover, which is also known as downtime. And then using industry numbers of, an average of average, what's the cost of an outage for an organization? And middle of the road, if it was, 500,000 per hour, and obviously it's going to be different for your company, and you have to kind of put your own company's data into these models, but representatively, the cost per downtime for the high performance is very low, versus low performers and medium performers, it's very high. So when you have something that doesn't work because you deployed it and you had to roll it back and there was outages, we're talking cost avoidance in the millions of dollars. And you'll notice an interesting thing, and they observed this and tried to explain the difference between medium performers, the cost of downtime per deployment, 4.6 versus 2.8. You would think that the low performers would be higher, but what their assumption is that the low performers end up putting the projects into their backlog, and the backlog continues to grow and never gets dealt with. So it ends up increasing the technical debt that I referred to earlier. So this is another compelling reason to consider this. So, with those kind of factors, if you were to salvage that and just even taking a 10% rule of thumb and reinvesting that, what could you do with 10% more engineering time? Well, you could probably focus on being more creative and innovative and working on things that customers want. So these are the kinds of reinvesting that happens. It's not that you get rid of your folks. You take those people and you reinvest them into being better at what you do. So that's the method there. So I'm running out of time here, but tips on getting started. The first thing is you got to stop wasting your resources. You need to get onto this. Here's a starter kit attached to this slide presentation. There's a link in there. I've referenced the number of books that you can read. These are very good reads. I've read almost all of them. And they kind of describe, why this works, how it works, what are some of the components of it. So there's some good reference material that you need to get up to speed on. Now, you can fast-track this as well and get educated. We offer DevOps training. We offer cloud training and lean IT training and Agile training, to name a few. And that link will point you to some up-and-coming classes that I am running this September and October. to fast track this, so I strongly urge you to sign up and get up to speed on this and get your teams going. So at this point, I'm out of time here, but I'm going to try and take a couple of questions before the system shuts me down. If you have any questions, you could post them now, and I'll try and answer them. We are Micromation, just while I'm waiting for questions to come in. Our company focuses on helping organizations improve their customer value. So whether it be, helping you improve your products or reducing the time that it takes to get to market or lowering your cost or reducing risk, we help you make those improvements. And I don't see any questions coming in. Well, I'm going to end it now, and if you would be so kind to give me a rating of what you thought of this presentation, that would be great. I love to get feedback myself so that I can always improve. And I encourage you to attend some of our other sessions. Each month we have sessions that we run, and on the DevOps Agile ITSM channel, as well as I have a Lean ITSM channel, and that's running every month, and you can join those. And these sessions are also, as I said, recorded. So thank you very much, and I'm going to close off now and bid you farewell. Goodbye.